Hi, Rebecca here from Daily Wonder, joining you today as part of our parent series. Today's topic is storytelling. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how you can tell a story, about maybe some things to consider in your setup, and why we tell stories. If you're a Daily Wonder member, you know that much of the curriculum that we're offering to you is delivered through storytelling. So each day you're invited to bring new material to your children through oral storytelling. Now, this is the ideal. Of course, there's always permission for you to do it as you can. Maybe you need to read a story. Maybe you need to have notes beside you for telling your story. But when you tell a story to your child, you're giving them two different things. You're giving them a lot of literacy tools and capacities, things like listening to the tone of your voice and the pacing of your words, listening to all the elements that are part of your stories, things like alliteration, hyperbole, metaphor, simile, onomatopoeia, all of these literary elements that are part of stories bring to your child this sense of story and this idea of the language that you're speaking, whether it's English or another language. You're giving them lessons about even how to form the sounds in their mouth. As they watch you tell a story, you're giving them so many little bits of information about how to work with those sounds, how the lips move, how words come together, how the sounds work to create words, and things we don't think about as adults, but you're giving all of these skills to your children that we would call literacy skills. But you're also doing something else. You're also indicating to your child these living pictures. You're telling the story, and as you're telling it, you're imagining the picture in the story, the picture that was created when you originally read the story or learned the story. Those images, if you can imagine, they're kind of swimming around you and above you and in space as you're telling the story, not literally, but figuratively. And your children, as they listen to you tell a story, they're recreating those images as well. And they're learning how to create pictures as they think and listen. So then what happens later on in their life when they have their own idea, their own innovative, creative ideas, they're able to visualize and picture what it is they want to express. So we really want to lead your children to this high-level thinking ability. And we do that through oral storytelling by creating these living pictures in the imagination. The imagination is key. And so when you're telling a story, as I said, it's ideal if you're telling it orally. And there's lots of ways that you can become an oral storyteller. One way that has worked for me in the past, and I've been telling stories for over 20 years, for me, I read a story that's compelling to me, and I create these living pictures, these pictures in my imagination. And with those pictures, it's almost like place markers along the way of a story. And so then I put the book aside and I retell the story to myself based on those images that I have created in my imagination. And I jot down a few notes, a few place markers. And then I go to sleep. And something happens in the night when I'm asleep. Whether it's from my notes or from the living picture, whatever it is, it solidifies in me so that the next day when I'm ready to tell my children a story, it's there. All those images are there and they're in the right order so that I can tell a story from my memory. And what helps me and might help you and is indicated in the Daily Wonder lesson plans is to have an opening for your story. When I light the candle to tell a story, everything arrives there for me in my memory. It also helps your children know that this is a time for quiet listening. Maybe right before this, you have done something more in an out-breath or a louder activity. And then you're going to sing your song, say your verse, light your candle, and come to a place of stillness. It indicates to your children, this is where I listen. And they sit back, and whatever the place is where you're telling the story, all the images come to you as you watch the light on the candle come to life. And then you begin. Now, we have in the Daily Wonder lesson plans offered you some verses. We've offered you some songs that you can use, and those are certainly songs you can use for a story time. For some reason, long ago when I was very young, I started singing a song that I made up in a moment. and I can't undo that. So I'm going to light a candle and sing that song for you now. It may or may not make sense. Candle, candle, shining bright. Candle, candle, share your light. Once, long, long ago, there lived a king. The king lived in a grand castle, high up on the hill, where the breeze came in off the ocean and dusted salty, salty air across their cheeks. The king loved to wake up early and bake bread first thing in the day. The smell of the baking bread filled the air as the other people in the castle began to wake and stretch. Just at 6 a.m., the king would ring his bell and it tinkled through all the halls and bedrooms of the castle, and all would wake and come down the long, winding stairs to the smell of the fresh baked bread. And there you go. There's an opening that I just made up right on this spot. And what you'll want to do when you're telling a story is to try to include for your child as many of their senses as possible. So you will want to include the sense of smell in the baking of the bread, the sense of touch with the wind, the misty wind on the cheek, the sounds in the air of the tinkling bell, or the footsteps on the stairways, the sights and of the castle and the stairwell and all of these different things. The more of your child's senses you can engage in your storytelling, the more clear their internal images become. And this is just a wonderful offering for your child. Now, you heard me say, once long ago there was a king. This is a great way to start a story. Once long ago is a great way to start a story, particularly for the younger children. For the older children, and you might be talking about science or social studies and things, you can use similar words like, you'll remember that in Canada, long ago, we had no borders. Now, I'm going to tell you a story today about the time when those borders were created to separate Canada and the United States. And so it happened that on such and such date, in such and such place, it was decided. So you can still create this opening and this placement in time and place, this opening that allows you to put some place markers along the way after that and settles everybody into the story. And so you'll tell your story as many images of you as you have prepared, as long as your story is, and as long as your children can sit for. Then at the end of the story, you might repeat your song. And if you're lucky, you'll have a snuffer, and you can snuff your candle or have your child snuff the candle or blow out the candle. Your child can also, as early as grade 1, be lighting the candle. That's wonderful too. And you will close out your story, and your child might say, well, what happened here? And what were they thinking here? Those are some elements you'll come back to on the next day. You want those images that you have given to your child you want your child to work with those, to digest them, we might say. And they'll create images and they'll work with them to combine them with images they've made in the past. And by the next day, they will have arrived at some kind of conclusion. Now, this might not be some very intellectual message that they have received, but it's going to be something in the story. The archetypes that are there will have sat with them deeply, and they'll be able to retell the story in whatever way you ask them to do so. And from the stories is where we really get the lesson out. Whatever it is we want our children to learn, whatever our intention was with the story, it's by that next day that they have worked with those feelings in the story and arrived at that conclusion. So storytelling, it can sound very intimidating when we're saying that you might want to try oral storytelling. But it is also okay to read from a book. And it can be helpful to have read the book before so that you have already internalized the kind of imaginative pictures yourself. And when you do that, You're going to accentuate parts of the story that make sense to you, that had a bold message or a bold image for yourself. You're going to accentuate those parts of the story and thereby transfer that message onto your child. And if you're willing to try to tell an oral story, start with a small part. Start with just the beginning or just the ending. Or perhaps you just add in those elements to tell something to your child's senses. Maybe the story doesn't have those elements and you're just going to add those. That's your beginning with oral storytelling. Whatever it is, wherever you are, it's all going to benefit your child's literacy skills and their thinking skills, their ability to build mental images. So we wish you well. We know you can do it. And it's worth a try, even if you feel intimidated. So good luck and happy storytelling. See you next time.